Two families build fortunes the same year. 3 generations later, one family is arguing over what is left of a house they have to sell. The other family has just funded a grandchild's first business in cash without touching a cent of the original fortune. Same starting amount, same country, same opportunities. The difference was not the market, it was a rule. Long before mutual funds, brokerage apps, or financial advisors, a Jewish teacher named Rabbi Yitzhak gave a piece of financial advice. He lived centuries ago, and you have probably never heard his idea unless someone in your family already lives by it. Divide what you have into 3 parts. 1/3 in land, 1/3 in business, 1/3 kept where you can reach it in a moment. Here's what most people get wrong. They think being aggressive with money means committing fully. Buy the property, grow the business, let the cash sit idle only if there's nothing better to do with it. This feels bold, but it can leave everything exposed the moment something goes wrong. By the end of this video, you'll understand the full 3-part system and specifically why the money you keep sitting still is not wasted money. It's the part of your portfolio doing the most important job of all, and you'll see exactly how to check whether your own finances are quietly unbalanced right now. So where did Rabbi Yitzhak's rule come from, and what did those 3 categories mean at the time? 1/3 went into land, 1/3 into a business or trade, and 1/3 was kept close, ready to use. At the time, land represented a tangible, productive asset. It could provide food, housing, or rent, and it was generally harder to move or conceal than coins or merchandise, but it was never completely risk-free. Business meant trade, a merchant's inventory, a skill, something that took your labor and multiplied it. And money kept close meant exactly what it sounds like: coins, savings, something you could reach without asking permission or waiting for a sale to close. Here's the part worth sitting with. This teacher wasn't trying to guess which of the 3 would perform best. He had no way of knowing whether the harvest would fail, whether the trade routes would close, or whether the currency itself would lose value. Nobody could know that. So instead of predicting the one right answer, he built a structure that worked no matter which future showed up. The system didn't require a family to predict the future correctly. It prepared them for several different futures. That's the whole engine behind everything you're about to learn. Not smarter guessing, better structure, and this isn't a story about religion, and it isn't a rule that only works for one culture. It's a structural discipline anyone can adopt once you understand what each part is actually protecting you from. So what does each third actually do? Because this isn't 3 equal piles of money sitting in different accounts doing the same job. Each one has a completely different responsibility, and understanding the job matters more than getting the exact percentage right. The first third is land and stability. Think of this as anything tangible you own that holds value over time. A house you live in, a rental duplex, farmland, a small commercial unit you lease out. In today's terms, this could also be a real estate fund or a share in a property partnership you never have to manage yourself. This third's job is preservation. It doesn't need to move fast. It needs to still be standing in 20 years. The weakness is built into the job. Property is slow and often expensive to turn into cash. If you need money within 30 days, a house may not help you. You might have to accept a lower offer, borrow against it, or discover that the sale cannot close quickly enough. This doesn't mean property is a bad investment. It means property was never designed to be the part of your money that moves fast. The second third is business and productive capital. This is anything you own that actively produces or grows. A small business you run, shares in a company, an online store, a stake in a partnership, equipment that generates income, like a car you rent out through a sharing app or machinery you lease to someone else. This third's job is growth. It's the part of your money that's supposed to compound, expand, and multiply. The way a seed turns into a harvest, the weakness here is volatility. Businesses fail, markets fall. Sometimes the thing that's supposed to grow your money needs more money poured into it just to survive a rough quarter. The third is money kept within reach. We're going to go deep on this one in a moment because it's the part almost everyone gets wrong. For now, just know its basic job. This is money you can use immediately without selling anything and without asking a bank for permission. None of this requires wealth you don't already have. A first apartment, a small side hustle selling something online, and a modest high-yield savings account are the same three categories, just smaller. The categories matter more than the size of the numbers inside them. One part preserves, one part produces, and one part prepares. Picture two people with the exact same amount of money. One puts almost everything into a house and a growing business, keeping only a sliver in the bank. The other keeps a real third in reach at all times. On paper, in a good year, they might look identical. Net worth, similar. Assets, similar. But the moment something goes wrong, an emergency, a downturn, a sudden opportunity, only one of them can actually move. Now, here's the part most people get completely backwards, and it's the most important idea in this whole video. Most people treat cash like it's asleep, dead weight, money that isn't working unless it's locked into a stock, a rental property, or a business. So they push almost everything into those two categories and treat the reach it in a moment third as an afterthought. Maybe a few weeks of expenses, nothing more. But liquidity isn't sleeping money. It's doing 4 separate jobs at once, and most people only recognize one of them. The first job is emergency protection. This is the one everybody already knows. Income stops, a car breaks down, a medical bill shows up, and the reachable third covers it without anyone needing to borrow. The second job is protection against forced selling. This one gets missed constantly. If your money is locked into property or a business and an emergency hits, you don't get to wait for a good moment to sell. You sell into whatever the market is doing that week, good or terrible. Picture a household with 2 incomes, most of their savings invested in stocks, riding out what looks like a normal year. Then one partner loses their job the same month the market drops sharply. Rent is still due, groceries are still due, so shares get sold at a loss, not because anyone wanted to sell, but because there was nothing else in reach. A year later, the market has recovered completely, but the shares that were sold to cover rent never get to recover with it. That loss is permanent, and it was never really about the market. It was about having nowhere else to turn. A downturn plus an emergency at the same time is exactly how families lose the most value. Not because the asset was bad, but because they were forced to sell it at the worst possible moment. The third job is reducing your dependence on debt. Without a reachable third, every surprise gets solved with a credit card, a loan, or refinancing something you already own. Each of those costs you an interest, and each one quietly chips away at the very thing you were trying to protect. The fourth job is the one nobody talks about: opportunity capital. This is where liquidity stops being about protection and starts being about offense. Picture this: a small business 2 streets over from yours, one you've watched for years, suddenly goes up for sale because the owner is retiring and just wants out fast. Or a rental property near you drops in price because the seller needs to close before the end of the month. Or your own business hits a rough patch and needs a short injection of cash to make it through to the other side. In every one of these moments, the person with a real third kept in reach can act immediately. The person who put everything into land and business has to watch the opportunity go to someone else, or borrow their way into it at a worse deal than the one they were originally offered. It doesn't have to be a business or a property either. It can be as small as a limited time discount on equipment you already needed, or a chance to buy out a partner share of something you already run together. Opportunity doesn't wait politely for you to finish selling something else first. None of this requires a large net worth before it starts mattering. Someone with a thin emergency fund and one maxed out credit card already knows exactly what forced borrowing feels like. The wealthy version of the same mistake just has more zeros attached to it. Liquidity is not only emergency money, it is opportunity money. So ask yourself something honest. If the best financial opportunity of your life showed up tomorrow, could you act without being forced into a rushed sale or expensive debt? Selling an asset or borrowing strategically is not automatically a problem. The danger is having no option except to do either from a position of desperation. Please don't misunderstand this as an argument for hoarding cash. I already showed you what an oversized third looks like in the first part of this video, and it's not safe either. Here's where the math gets uncomfortable for people who keep too much sitting in a regular savings account. That money feels responsible. It sits there untouched for years, exactly the way you were taught money is supposed to behave. Meanwhile, prices around it keep climbing. Run this forward 10 years with prices rising a modest few percent a year, and that untouched cash quietly loses roughly a quarter of its real buying power. Nothing dramatic happens. No single bad day, just a slow leak that's invisible until you actually measure it. That's exactly why the third only works as 1/3, enough to protect you and let you move. Not so much that the slow leak quietly drains it while you feel secure. The goal was never to pick a side between cash and growth. It's to keep enough oxygen in the tank that you're never a forced seller and never a missed buyer. So what happens when a family ignores this and leans hard into just 1/3? Picture someone who owns 3 rental units, runs a steady online business, and keeps only a thin cushion in the bank. In a good year, the spreadsheet looks great. Then a tenant stops paying rent the same month a supplier problem chokes the business, and suddenly there's nowhere left to pull from. There are 3 common ways people break the balance, and each one feels smart in the moment. The first is too much cash. Money feels safe sitting in a savings account, and in the short term, it's safe. But over years, it quietly erodes while it sits there earning little to nothing. This is a version of what psychologists call loss aversion. The fear of losing money feels far more painful than the reward of growing it. So people keep piling into the one option that feels like it can't go down, even after it stops making sense. The second is too much property. This is the family that looks wealthy on paper, multiple properties, real equity, an impressive net worth, but almost none of it is actually accessible. A vacancy, a repair, a job loss, and suddenly they're forced to borrow or sell, not because they're poor, but because their wealth is frozen solid. The third is too much business or investment risk. Every dollar gets reinvested straight back into growth. This looks aggressive and feels exciting while conditions are good. Picture someone running a business that's genuinely doing well, expanding into a new location, hiring more people, and pouring every spare dollar straight back in. Then one slow season arrives, the kind every business eventually goes through, and there's no reserve anywhere to cover payroll while things recover. The business itself wasn't the mistake. The absence of any cushion around it was. It's a textbook case of overconfidence. Growth feels like proof the plan is working, right up until one bad quarter reveals there was never a cushion underneath it. None of these 3 mistakes make someone reckless or foolish. Each one is the result of a reasonable instinct, just pushed slightly too far past where it stopped helping. History offers a real example of what can happen when this kind of balance breaks down. The Medici Bank, built by one of Renaissance Florence's most powerful banking families, ran separate branches in Rome, Venice, and London, each operating as its own legal entity. It wasn't built as an example of the Jewish rule of thirds, but the structure meant trouble in one branch didn't automatically sink the rest. Later generations drifted from that discipline anyway. Their reserves became tied up in political obligations and lavish spending, less and less liquid every year. When several branches failed at once, there was nothing left to absorb it, and the empire that once dominated European banking collapsed entirely. Here's why the balanced version survives what these 3 don't. If property values fall, a healthy business and available cash can carry the family through. If the business struggles, the property and the reachable third buy time to rebuild it. If the slow leak eats away at cash, the productive and tangible thirds keep growing to make up the difference. A single failure becomes less likely to take everything down because no single category was ever carrying the entire structure. You do not divide your wealth because you know which part will fail. You divide it because you know that eventually something will. That's not pessimism. That's just paying attention to how often life actually goes according to plan. There's a fourth layer to this that most people never think about, hidden inside the 3/3 themselves. You can establish the three categories and still get the timing wrong within them. Your liquid reserve may be available today, while nearly everything in your stability and productive categories is locked into the same distant future. That may protect you from a basic emergency, but still leave very little capital becoming available along the way. Picture someone who maintains an emergency reserve. Beyond that, their wealth sits in three places: a rental property that may take months to sell, a retirement account intended for decades later, and a business stake that will not return capital for another 5 years. The person is not completely without liquidity, but beyond that reserve, almost nothing can move. This pattern has a name: diversify into paralysis. Different assets, mostly the same problem. The reserve does its job, but almost nothing else can move when you actually need it to. The fix is to think in terms of 4 time horizons, not just 3 categories. The first is money available immediately. Cash in an account you can access today. No waiting period, no penalty. The second is short-term money, something that can become cash within a few months if you need it to, without taking a major loss to get it out. The third is medium-term capital, money tied up for a few years, growing, but with a known point where it becomes available again. Money you're setting aside for a house down payment a few years out fits here perfectly. It isn't meant to be touched today, but it isn't meant to disappear until retirement either. The fourth is long-term investment, money that's meant to stay locked away for a decade or more, doing its slowest, most powerful compounding work undisturbed. Run the math on that last one. Say you invest a lump sum today, growing at 10% a year, roughly the long-term historical average return of the S&P 500. Left completely untouched for 20 years, it grows to more than 6.5 times its starting size. That's the power of leaving long-term money alone. But if every dollar you own is locked into that same 20-year timeline, it doesn't matter how large that eventual number gets. It's not there for you in year 8 when you actually need it. The size of the number means nothing if the timing is wrong. True diversification is not only about where your money is, it is also about when you can use it. Here's how this survives past one lifetime into a family that outlasts you. Picture a father sitting down with his teenage son at the kitchen table, not to talk about grades or curfew, but to walk him through exactly why the family keeps a certain account untouched, no matter how good an investment looks. That conversation is worth more than any amount he could hand over in a will. This doesn't require a family fortune to begin either. A parent explaining why the family keeps a few months of expenses untouched, even when a tempting purchase is sitting right there, is teaching something powerful. It's the exact same lesson as a wealthy family protecting an entire business empire. The size of the money changes. The lesson underneath it doesn't. The families who keep wealth across generations aren't passing down better investments. They're passing down the rule itself, the same way you'd pass down a family recipe or a piece of advice about which roads to avoid at night. Children in these families grow up understanding a specific set of things: why wealth should never sit concentrated in one place, why a reachable third has to stay protected even when a great opportunity is tempting them to spend it, why business risk needs a ceiling no matter how well things are going, why property matters but property alone was never the whole plan, and why confidence should never replace preparation no matter how sure someone feels. Education fits into the same structure, and it deserves its own place in the plan, not just a footnote. Property can be lost, a business can fail, a currency can lose value overnight, but a skill and a real understanding of how money actually behaves survives every one of those losses. It's the asset that rebuilds everything else. Passing a family business between generations is genuinely difficult. Research from the Family Business Institute suggests that roughly 30% of family businesses continue into the second generation. About 12% make it into the third, and only a small percentage into the fourth. But those numbers measure whether the original business stays under family ownership, not whether the family's total wealth survives. The safer lesson is that inheritance without deliberate preparation can leave the next generation unprepared to manage what it receives. One thing that can help families break that pattern is explaining the rule out loud more than once, long before anyone actually needs to use it in a crisis. The most valuable inheritance is not only the money, it is the method that prevents the money from disappearing. This isn't a claim that everyone from this tradition follows the rule perfectly, or that it's some secret formula nobody else has access to. It's a principle passed down deliberately, generation after generation, inside a culture that treats financial teaching as seriously as it treats any other inheritance. And it's available to absolutely anyone willing to actually teach it to the people coming up behind them. So, how do you actually apply this to your own money starting today? First, let go of the idea that you need a perfectly even split across every category starting tomorrow. The right balance depends on your age, how stable your income is, how much debt you're carrying, and whether anyone depends on you financially. It also depends on whether you own a business, whether you own your home, how close you are to retirement, and how much risk you can actually stomach. The number that matters isn't a perfect third. It's making sure all three jobs, stability, growth, and access, are actually being done somewhere in your finances. Start with an honest inventory. List everything: cash and savings, including anything sitting in a high yield account, investment accounts, retirement accounts, equity in property, ownership in a business or side venture, anything that produces income, and any debt attached to those assets. Then classify each item under one of the three jobs. Is it there for stability? Is it there to produce growth? Or is it there so you can reach it fast? Once that's done, look for where you're dangerously concentrated. Ask yourself a few honest questions. Is almost everything you own tied up in property? Does your entire financial future depend on one single business? Are you holding a huge pile of cash purely out of fear, doing nothing for you? And here's the biggest one. Could you survive a real drop in income without selling something? Could you jump on a genuine opportunity without going into debt for it? If the answers are uncomfortable, the fix isn't to panic and rearrange everything overnight. Rebalancing is gradual. Redirect new savings toward whichever third is thinnest. Stop adding more to the category that's already overloaded. Separate your emergency money from your opportunity money, even just mentally, so you always know which is which. And build in different time horizons as you go, so your money isn't all locked to the same future date. If none of your money currently sits in the reachable third, don't wait until you have thousands saved before you start. Even a small, consistent transfer into a high-yield account each month begins building the third that protects everything else. The habit matters before the size does. Do not worship the percentage. Understand the responsibility of each third. Let's go back to those two families from the beginning. Same starting amount, same country, same opportunities. But 3 generations later, one family was selling the house, the other was funding what came next. The difference was never the market, and it was never luck. The perfect investment doesn't exist. Nothing can grow fast, stay completely safe, and remain instantly available all at the same time. That's exactly why this rule gives your money 3 separate jobs instead of asking one investment to do everything at once. One part preserves what you already have. One part produces more of it. One part stays ready, reducing the chance that you'll watch an opportunity pass you by or be forced to sell at the worst possible moment. Lasting wealth is not built only by knowing how to make money. It is built by knowing how to keep standing when one part of your financial life stops working, because eventually one part will. You don't need to fix your entire financial life today. You just need to know right now which of the 3 jobs your money is missing. That's where this actually starts.